Okay, so maybe some of you are familiar with this woman, the lovely Madame Jean-Louis Calment. She was born in Arles, France, and she sold paintbrushes to Van Gogh. And she did make it to 90. So I just want to tell a little story about her when she was 90. She had a wonderful apartment in Paris. And at that time, when you reached a very old age, a younger person could make payments to the apartment and take it over when you die. So she did that with a 47-year-old man, and he began making the payments, and he paid 10 years, and then he paid another 10 years. Now, mind you, she's 90. And actually, he ended up paying for 30 years. And I guess it was just too much for him because he up and died, and she was still alive. She lived to be 122, which is amazing. And she died in 1997, which is already a quarter of a century ago. And no one has outlived her yet. So I'm going to talk a little bit about her because she's so much fun. There's a picture of her at 121. There she is on her bicycle. She rode her bike in her 90s. And she holds the record for the Guinness Book of World Records as being the longest living human life. She exercised, she walked until 115, age 115. She was a mother and a homemaker. She outlived her own daughter and grandson by decades. She loved art. She did consume a Mediterranean diet. She loved chocolate, and she also smoked. She smoked into her 90s and still made it that far. She only quit smoking because she got bad macular degeneration and she couldn't see anymore. So she finally quit smoking. But I just want to go back and tell you something cute about her here. When I was practicing my speech once, my daughter, she was only 7 years old at the time, and she saw Madame Clement. And the first thing she said to me was, "Mom, why is she in that cage?" Which was cute. And then I said to her, "Honey, this is the oldest living woman in the world. She lived to be 122. And then Danielle, she just looked at me and she said, "Oh, Mom, I will have to have a much better life if I'm going to make it that far." And it was so cute. And it was so true. Here she is 7, and she understands already that if we're going to live long, we want to live well. Okay. So if increases in life expectancy continue, more than half of all the children born today in developed countries can expect to make it to their 100th birthday. And now it's actually 103, which is just amazing too. Here are projections of the population growth among 90-year-olds. So in 2001, we only had maybe 2 million in the country. Look what's happening over the years. By 2050, there'll be 10 million people in the country over the age of 90. And it presents a huge public health burden because as people get to be that old, the risk of dementia rises. And we found that Alzheimer's disease costs way, way more than all cancers and heart disease combined. But again, there's also the burden of frailty and other diseases, disabilities, all kinds of illnesses. So once again, I'll just repeat, if we're going to make it that far, we really want to live well. Here are some studies on dementia, and it shows different countries and how the risk of dementia increases. So after 65, the risk goes up. Every 5 years, it actually doubles just by age alone, your risk for dementia. But if you look at the graph, you can see the rise is going from 65 up to 85, even 90 pretty consistently. But then what happens after age 90? The studies change. So in Munich, Germany, it continues to go up. If you look at Canada, it's going up. If you look at the pink bar, which is Utah in the United States, it's actually going down and then leveling off in some other countries around the world. But in Brazil, you can be 90, and then it looks like by the time you're 94, your risk may go down, and then it stops. So hardly any of these studies are following people into 100, but our study does, the 90 plus study. So I will tell you what happens in our study. But again, like, what do? Do we all move to Brazil so we cut our risk of dementia? So we're going to talk more about that. Here it shows another study about dementia, as there's different kinds, many types of dementia. It's not just Alzheimer's disease. And when people died of it in their 70s, it was only unknown to the neuropathologists 5% of the time. All the other times they figured out, they knew what disease it was. But it gets worse as people get into their 80s and 90s. By 90, when they do the autopsy on the brain, half the time they still did not know what caused the dementia in the people. So why do we study the oldest old? The fastest growing segment of the population. They've been excluded from many aging and dementia studies and clinical trials. And many population-based studies have low numbers of the oldest old. And again, many do not advance up to 100, 106. We even had the oldest living male. He made it to be 111, and he did live in Laguna Woods, which is amazing. He was part of our study. At the time, President Trump sent him a letter, a happy birthday card. Okay, so again, what's unknown in 90-year-olds? The risk and protective factors are related to living longer. We're going to look at prevalence and incidence of dementia in this age group, and also what could protect, or what are the risk factors related to dementia, and the different types, like I said. Okay, and then the overview is just, we're going to look at longevity, dementia, and the oldest old, and then we're going to look at the clinical pathological correlations that we find in the brain. Here is Leslie Stahl. I did work very hard back in 2014 to get our study on TV. And we did it. And that was May 2014. We were on again in November of 2020. But you can see all of these newspapers and shows, Italian public TV, Australia. We've just been all around the world with our work. And I have some clips from this show that I'd like to share with you, give you more of a background as well. And then just to let you know, the study began with the Leisure World Cohort study at USC back in 1981. There were 14,000 people that completed a health survey. And then at that time, they were primarily white, two-thirds were female, because females always live longer. Sorry, guys. And the median age of enrollment was 73. They were well educated. And at that time, Laguna Woods was called Leisure World. It was an amazing place with lots of clubs and activities. They even had a 90-year-old mayor. They make me tired just thinking about them, but they were this wonderful group. And we recruited our 90-year-olds after 91, 20 years later, into the 90 plus study. So now I will let you see some of the clips, and you'll get a really great background.
I was born on April 21st, 1914.
My birthday is February 7th, 1918. I was born on August 25th, 1920, and I'm 93 plus.
June 15, 1918, and it was, I'm sure, a lovely day.
Do you feel 95? What age do you feel?
I feel about 52. Not really.
What they have in common, other than having lived a combined total of almost 400 years, is that decades ago, they all lived in a retirement community called Leisure World, 45 miles south of Los Angeles.
Hi there, and welcome to Leisure World, a new way of life designed for alert and active people 52 years or older who want to get the most out of life.
Today, it's still a retirement community, and they're still getting the most out of life, though it's no longer called Leisure World. It's now its own city, Laguna Woods.
Okay.
They didn't like the words leisure world. They consider themselves active
World.
active world.
Dr. Claudia Kawas spends a lot of time in Laguna Woods these days. She's a neurologist and professor at nearby UC Irvine who discovered the research equivalent of gold here. Information gathered from thousands of Leisure World residents back in 1981, with page after page of data about their diet, exercise, vitamins, and activities.
14,000 people answered
14,000.
this questionnaire in 1981. Many of them, if they were still alive, would now be over the age of 90.
She saw a rare opportunity to study what worked and what didn't. So did you try to find them?
We went after all 14,000, and if they were still alive, we wanted to find where they were.
With $6 million of funding from the National Institutes of Health, Kawas and her team set out to find out who had died, when they died, and to convince those who were still living and over 90 to sign up.
And you're how old now?
I'll be 103 months.
We're going to have a party.
Good.
Jane Whistler
I love a party.
is one of the more than 1,600 men and women they found and enrolled as subjects in the 90-plus study. They are checked from top to bottom every 6 months.
Big smile?
Their facial muscles,
Excellent.
reflexes, balance,
3, 4, 5.
how they walk, how fast they can stand up and sit down,
Fantastic.
and most importantly, how their minds are working.
I'm going to say and show you 3 words for you to remember. Shirt, brown, honesty.
Shirt, brown, honesty.
Perfect. Now please spell world.
They are given an hour-long battery of cognitive and memory tests.
Good. Now spell world backwards.
DLROW.
Asked to connect letters and numbers
There you go.
and to remember.
All right. What 3 words did I ask you to remember earlier?
Brown, shirt,
You want a little hint?
yeah.
Okay. Was that word honesty, charity,
Honesty.
or modesty? Yes.
So that was our clip from 2014. And again, our study takes place in Laguna Woods. Here is a picture of our office on the outside. And our goal when we started was to study the risk factors that may contribute to the prevention of Alzheimer's disease and dementia. So just to recap, you heard Leslie talking to my study doctor, Dr. Kawas. In 2003, we were able to recruit over 1,100 survivors. And then by today, I mean, here we are 18 years later, we're still recruiting. We recruit new members now as well, and we're up to 1,978 participants. We see them every 6 months. We do testing for neuropsych, memory tests. We do a neuro exam. We do neuroimaging. We ask them to do 2 PET scans of the brain and 1 MRI. And then we ask them to donate their brain when they pass. Again, the intake, we look at their demographics, their medical history. We test them. We also ask their family members to answer questions called informant questionnaires. We take their DNA, and again, brain imaging and brain donation at the end of their lives. You saw some of the physical performance tests that we do. We look at their walk. We measure their hand grip. And then when the study started, the people that lived in Laguna Woods may have moved to other parts of the country. And we were proud to say that we followed each participant no matter where they lived. We actually had one person move to Puerto Rico. We had another person move to Hawaii. And my staff, boy, they were so upset when the one in Hawaii passed away. But yeah, the team would fly every 6 months and do the evaluations. Wow. Just a little background on medical histories. You can see high blood pressure. Over half had high blood pressure. Many, of course, have osteoarthritis. Many have survived cancer, which is incredible. Macular degeneration is high cholesterol. And then as you can just go down the list, people, with stroke, maybe, don't make it over 90, or bad heart disease. We don't see many 90-year-olds with diabetes, but now with advances in healthcare, we are seeing some more. And small amount have depression. So that's a background of histories. And I wanted to talk about what was related to longevity. So we looked at vitamins, beverages, and drinks to see what may have made these people make it to their 90s. Again, it's an observational study, so it's based on what people reported. The people from 1981, when they were in their, 50s, and then, many years later, when they made it to 90 and come into our study, to see what happened with them. What did they report? Maybe that might have helped them to live longer. So we looked at vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin A and E. I thought maybe C and E would have an effect because they're antioxidants. We looked at calcium, soft drinks. We looked at how much they weighed and how much they exercised, and also their leisure activities. We wondered about caffeine, and we wondered about alcohol. So I can tell you that vitamin C did not make any difference on living longer. Same with vitamin A, nothing with vitamin E. Calcium didn't matter. Drinks, soda didn't matter, black tea or green tea. But look at the remaining ones. Body mass, it mattered about your weight. So if you were a little bit overweight in your late 70s, 80s, that helped you to live longer than being too thin. Also, exercise helped, which is probably very understandable, and leisure activities were good. We found caffeine to be good, and even alcohol, which people love to hear. Here a little bit more about body mass index. I just want to say again, like when you're 20, or even 40, you never want to be obese. And even though I said you want to gain a little weight for living longer in your 70s, 80s, even then you don't want to be obese. But a little bit of extra weight helped for people over 80 to make it to 90. And in fact, my aunt, she suffered from COVID in New York, and she was on a ventilator. But I always said to her, Aunt Louise, you're going to make it. You have that extra weight on you to help protect you. And it did. I mean, she got off the vent and she survived, which is wonderful. But she too remembered from my study saying, she would just joke and say, oh yeah, it's okay that I have a little extra weight. I'm going to make it to be 90. And I believe that's true. Again, this is just showing the graph to show how it is a little bit better to be slightly overweight in your 70s, but never want to be obese or too thin when you're old. And here, the activities for exercise, we found that 15 minutes a day was good, 30 and 45. But if you did over 45 minutes a day, even up to 2 or 3 hours, it didn't make a difference. So, and the exercise could be done at different times. So again, even 15 minutes made a difference, and 45 minutes was best. And these again were people that reported that's what they did in their life, when they were in their, 55, 65 when they lived in leisure world. Other activities are good too. Sightseeing, sewing, crafts. It's very good just to stay busy, and even gardening. All of those things help people to live longer. With alcohol, we found 1 or 2 glasses a day gave a reduction in mortality up to 18%. And that meant wine or beer or other. And again, we found caffeine to help. 2 cups of coffee a day had a reduction in mortality of 10%. Now, we never tell people to start drinking if they were never a drinker before. But again, this is what people reported. Those that drank alcohol had a longer life than those that abstained. And the same with coffee. Those that drank coffee lived longer than those that did not. Now we'll look at what did we find that may have been related to dementia in the oldest old. And what is dementia? It's a decline in the mental ability that is severe enough that it interferes with our daily lives. Here are some examples of the different types of dementia in the elderly. You can see Alzheimer's disease, 52%, and vascular, 17, which meaning strokes. And you can see the others that are much lower, like Lewy body dementia, only 4% of the time. And Lewy bodies makes it a little different in that memory is not impacted first. Other things are like executive function, there's fluctuations, they have sleep problems, so it's a little bit different. And frontotemporal dementia, so you can see it's only 2%, and that is because people with that dementia don't live as long. They don't really make it to their 90s, but that's the dementia where people act very strange and have, weird sexual comments and things like that. Parkinson's disease, most everyone, if they live long enough, will get dementia, but that was low in our cohort. Others could be even alcohol abuse, head trauma can cause dementia. Our baseline characteristics, we showed that many of our participants had good education, college grad or more, 40%. We had many widowed, of course. Average age of women was like 95, and they lived, interesting in a third of a nursing home, living alone or living with others. And their cognitive diagnosis was normal, impaired, like MCI, mild cognitive impairment, but no dementia, and then dementia. So I want to tell you what we found in our study in relation to the incidence of dementia with people over 90 at the 90 plus study. So here we are back in the United States, in California. And look at that. Look how it skyrockets so high that showing that the risk of dementia simply advances so much just with age. And you can see there too that our age group hits 100 and over. So yeah, just virtually by getting older, your risk increases. But again, it doesn't mean all of us will end up with it. It just shows the risk factor. So aging is the elephant in the room. Age is the biggest risk factor for dementia. That's what we've shown. And then some of the other things we looked at, like did the vitamins, having a little extra weight, did alcohol matter? Do any of these things, your thyroid have to do with risk factors for dementia? And none of those did, none of those. Then we looked at vascular risk factors. We looked at hypertension, which we said a lot of people over 90 have it. We looked at coronary artery disease, congestive heart failure, AFib. And they're all crossed off except for hypertension. Vascular risk factors did not distinguish participants with dementia and those without, except for hypertension. And I'll talk more about that. Wow. So we had 600 and some participants. We looked at their blood pressures, the normal group and the pre-hypertension and the hypertension. And just flat out, we found those with hypertension over in their 90s to have an 80% reduction. And if it was just slightly hypertensive, maybe 70%. So we're trying to figure out, why is hypertension coming out to be protective for these 90-year-olds? And it even showed that it made a difference if they had high cholesterol with their hypertension, and if the hypertension started in their 90s or started in their 80s rather than when they were younger. Again, here's the age onset of hypertension. See, 80 to 90, 80 to 89, and then 90 plus shows it to be the risk to be lower for those with the risk of dementia was, I'm sorry, I'm losing my thought. Let me just move on. Okay, so again, blood pressure and dementia. Normal blood pressure may be different for 90-year-olds because we found many to have very high blood pressure and still live longer. Maybe the vessels of the elderly may require advanced pressure for good perfusion. Maybe if you had low blood pressure, it may be a marker for other diseases, and that's why you may not have lived as long. We don't really know about medication effects, and so on. Okay, now I'll talk a little bit about the autopsy study. We enrolled 605, and 427 have come to autopsy. And here, just looking straight at dementia versus no dementia, and the age of 97, those with a higher MMSE, which is a neuropsych test, and a heavier brain showed no dementia, but those with lower cognitive scores and a smaller brain showed dementia. Here's just a picture of an Alzheimer's brain versus the normal. It's way different. And then Alzheimer's disease, the pathological features are plaques and tangles are the hallmark. The plaques are beta amyloid, and the tangles are tau. And that's what we find in the brain that causes AD. Okay, so here we had people that passed, and on their autopsy, they had no dementia cognitively, but yet we found 42% of them did have the plaques and tangles in the brain. And then about 60% didn't, which is what you would expect because they had no dementia. And then, of course, those with dementia, a very high amount, 60% had AD pathology, and then 40% did not.
Wow.
Did brain PET scans. We now do tau scans, but earlier in the study, we did mostly amyloid or plaques, scanning them to see if there's plaques in the brain. And it's amazing how the 90-year-olds get in that scanner. I had once, the lady was 105, she was nervous. And all she could say to me was, if you would just stand with me and hold my hand, I'll make it. And I did that, and she got that scan done. So they're really amazing on what they will do to help research. Here, it's showing on the left, amyloid negative, no plaques, which is very blue. And on the right, amyloid positive, which does show, the plaques, only the plaques, not the tangles. And on the left, the woman in the video that was reaching her 100th birthday, actually, she just passed away, and she lived to be 106. And that's her scan on the left. However, she did have some cognitive impairment. She didn't have dementia, but she did have slight impairment. And then the one on the right has a positive scan. And this man, he just died too. And he lived to be 100, and he was amyloid positive. And again, he was on the 60-minute show, but his cognition was normal. So there you have it. He had the plaques, but he still functioned normally. Other pathologies that may contribute to dementia. Again, I spoke about the Lewy bodies. Microinfarcts are tiny infarcts in the brain that are very difficult to see on an MRI scan right now, only on autopsy. Hippocampal sclerosis is very new, and we're learning more about this. My newest physician is researching it in the 90+ study, but that also can cause dementia. And then the number of pathologies. So if you only had one pathology, it may, maybe your risk was lower, but look, if you've had 3 pathologies, your risk of dementia is like 100%. So the more problems in the brain, the more likelihood of having dementia. And I'll do another video for you. Here we go.
Newspapers every day?
Yes, I read them in the evening.
Loring Bigelow spent 5 years in the study. He passed away last summer, and while Dr. Kim studies his brain, the rest of the 90+ team independently reviews years of his test results and videos to assess whether he had developed dementia, and if so, from what. While early on his scores were strong,
Who is our president?
Obama.
over the years there was a gradual but unmistakable decline. He'd pick up a newspaper he had just finished, use the TV remote to try and make a phone call.
Do you know who is the president?
I want to say Herbert Hoover.
Okay.
I can't think of it.
Not remember his age. Anxious.
The consensus here was likely Alzheimer's, which presumes a brain with plaques and tangles.
Are we ready to hear the truth?
Only then do they open up Dr. Kim's report.
Plaques, 0, so no plaques. Actually.
Wow.
No cortical tangles anywhere.
Pretty amazing.
What's amazing is they're finding that 40% of the time in people over 90, what doctors would think is Alzheimer's isn't. In Loring Bigelow's brain, Dr. Kim found something else, something the 90+ study is finding quite a bit, evidence of tiny microscopic strokes called microinfarcts. His brain was full of them.
Here is a microinfarct. It's the hole, which is basically a tiny stroke.
So you've got all this tissue is missing.
If you find one, it suggests that you should probably look for others, and some patients may have hundreds or thousands of them.
These microscopic strokes are insidious because people don't even know they're having them.
They can be totally silent, and slowly but surely over time, you're picking off, you're disconnecting your cortex from the rest of the brain, and then you start to become demented. It can look just like Alzheimer's disease clinically.
Wow, so you can see with Mr. Bigelow, he had microinfarcts. And when we case conferenced him, we certainly thought it was Alzheimer's disease, but it wasn't. So it all requires more and more research. But we are seeing a remarkable increase in people living longer all around the world. The risk of dementia continues to increase with age. Risk factors change with age, like the hypertension is a risk factor when you're younger, but may be helpful or protective when you're in your 90s. And then having more than one pathology in the brain is more likely to, or more important in the development of dementia with aging. So, you know, I used to think 65 was pretty old. But now that I'm 60, I'm thinking it's maybe not quite that old. And, you know, honestly, it's all in how you feel. And here in this little joke, it just says 95 is the new 65. And I really think that that's true. Working with these 90-year-olds, they're amazing. Some of them are so strong and quick, and you would just never guess their age to be 95. So I don't think it's old anymore. I don't think 95 is old or 65. So 95 is definitely the new 65. I'd like to thank my doctors, Dr. Kawas and Kurata. They are the PIs of the study, co-PIs. And we also have collaborators at Stanford and UC Davis, and then on the East Coast, and also UCLA. We couldn't do the study without the participants, of course, so we're very thankful to them and, of course, our staff. Here are clips of the folks you saw. At the bottom is Mr. Sharrow. He was the one I told you that had a positive scan and did very well all the way to 100. He somehow fought the disease. And then Jane on the right lived to be 106. She was amazing. She just had a little bit of impairment and she had the negative scan. And here's our team. And thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it.